This episode of Instant Analysis is brought to you by Platinum Storage Group and Real Estate Investments. For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber for Instant Analysis of Day 16 of the Todd McNair NCAA trial. And today we heard from the last live witness of this trial, Dr. Peter Formuzis. We actually heard from him yesterday, but we got to the meat, the heart of his testimony today. What did he have to say, and what is his credentials?
Well, he's a doctorate. Has a doctorate in economics. He's a Washington State undergrad, a Michigan State PhD. He was a faculty member, I guess, at the University of Montana, where he's head of the department. Then he came to Cal State Fullerton for 15 years, and then he retired and started a consulting business in Santa Ana, where he basically does these individualized studies of people who have, lawsuits. For lost wages and how much they would have earned in their career and all of that, and he documents it all. And he came up with the numbers of what Todd McNair has already lost, what he's would lose in the future, how that would be impacted if he took a job as a high school coach and teacher, what the impact was of him not really working much for a number of years and all that kind of thing. So that's where he left it, and we thought we might get an NCAA response from a sports economist. But I think the NCAA figured, they cross-examined and said, well, are you a sports specialist? And he said, no. And they said, do you usually do these kinds of things for the plaintiffs? And he said, yeah. And you always kind of, produce statistics that they agree with. Well, like you said, they wouldn't hire you if you didn't do that. And then they made the point that since he retired as a college professor, he said, my company, have made somewhere, I guess it was $500,000 to $700,000 a year, and they totaled it up and said, well, that's $15 million to $21 million you made doing these kinds of things since you left teaching. And he said, that's my company, and he said, I work really hard. So they left it at that. I think the NCAA said, okay, we made our points, they made their points. There was, I guess the grand total was somewhere around $7 million or something for Todd if they add up all the numbers. And so it doesn't seem like an overwhelmingly big number. But as you pointed out, some of the people Todd was coaching with are now head coaches. Some of the people who are on, some of those staffs with Todd. So, and they didn't push that really hard. What would have happened had he gone that direction, and what those kinds of numbers would be. So I thought it was kind of fair how it went.
Were you surprised at all that the NCAA didn't call their expert? I know that was on the docket to bring him in. How did you think that Formuzis kind of fared in the cross-examination? How did that impact what the jury might want to award Todd?
Yeah, I think the NCAA made a strategic decision. We don't have to do this. We don't have to. I don't know that they would have gained any more. I don't know that they could have come in and said, well, he wasn't going to make this. Or college coaches don't really I mean, if they did that, I think then you have Bruce and company probably going out and documenting the fact that maybe they aren't on the same staff, maybe they're not together, but most of those guys don't leave coaching. I mean, where else are you going to go to that you can possibly, I mean, he had the numbers that went from like $283,000 a year to where he would be now at the same level he was coaching at USC, and he had that number at $483,000 a year. I mean, where are any of those guys going to go, where they're going to be able to, earn more than that? So those guys aren't leaving. And he said his number was they tend to go till at least 65. And he said the higher earners, the economic data is the higher earners tend to stay working because that's when they're earning the most money. And so they said they tend to stay to 70. He only figured to 65 for Todd. So I thought that was fair. Either way, I think either side could say, this is not a bad thing for us. And the jury probably going to do what the jury's going to do anyway when it comes to figuring these things out. because there are non-economic damages and, loss of reputation and all that kind of stuff that they can put dollar values on.
Mm-hmm. After Dr. Formuzis, we got to hear the rest of Jo Potuto, her video deposition. She was a former voting member on the committee. And I think as far as the jury, I think you and I definitely agree. There wasn't really anything new from her testimony, but the thing that her deposition reinforced was who the NCAA was, who the COI was at the time of the Reggie Bush case, and how they handled this case. I think that got a little lost in Eleanor Meyer's testimony, but I think it reminded the jury who these people kind of came off as in earlier testimonies, and as you said, it was good for Todd McNair.
Yeah, I think it worked out well. Whether it was, when they cut it in half and decided, we'll come back at a later time. Did they realize that she would be kind of the last, because, we thought, well, the last really live witness, not counting Dr. Formuzis, was Eleanor Myers, which was maybe a slight plus for the NCAA just because she wasn't like any of the other witnesses. But then you come in with Jo Potuto and you are reminded with maybe some of the things you didn't like. I mean, she said, I don't recall, 3 times in 4 or 5 seconds. I mean, it was like, really? Or the email that she sent to the coordinator of the Committee on Infractions after watching Lloyd Lake's interview on television just 2 years before the hearings and said, I think I believe, this ex-con agent, I think he's credible. And when they, the question was, well, you've already made up your mind that Lloyd Lake's credible. Should you even be on that, on the committee? And she said, I don't even remember it. I mean, she actually sent an email because the story was done by one of her classmates, I'm guessing at law school, and Bernard Goldberg, and she said she'd totally forgotten about it. And I think that probably strains credulity, especially when if Todd McNair would have ever sent an email to somebody and then said, oh, I completely forgot about it, do you think they would have believed him? That would have been not only no credibility, that would have been lying. They would have known he was lying. The NCAA, if they were judged by the same standards that they judged Todd McNair, there'd been a whole lot of lying going around. And, they haven't been charged with that yet. But, man, a lot of the stuff. And I guess the thing that hit you, too, about the Potuto video was when she was questioned by Bruce Boilette, boy, things weren't very clear. And things weren't kind of just... And then when she got questioned by the NCAA person, cross-examination, she's chatty Cathy. And she remembers everything. And it's da-da-da-da-da-da. So it was like, is this the same person? Talking about kind of the same things. It was really an interesting juxtaposition. So as we say from the, if you're, on the Todd McNair side, from, a Saturday Night Live reference, more Potuto is what I think, that it was a good way to finish with Potuto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we finished the day on Jo Potuto. The jury actually was dismissed a little earlier than what they're used to. We stuck around for some of the housekeeping things with both sides of the attorneys. They tried to figure out the schedule going forward. So tomorrow, I believe the NCAA is going to try and figure out what they're going to do with the video deposition they either want to play. It's originally 4 hours long, but they're either going to shorten that down or just not play it at all.
We heard a promise, maybe just a half hour from either side.
Yeah.
It's a witness, I think Uhlenberg is from the appeals committee. And they haven't brought anything into the hearing about how the appeals committee handled the original hearing and findings. So it's probably not all that pertinent. It's not going to change anything, let's say that. But so that's the start of the day.
Yeah, and then they're going to finish with the jury instructions that Judge Schaller is going to read to the jury. It's probably going to take around 20 to 30 minutes to do that. And then there was talk about maybe starting closing arguments on Thursday. That's what it sounded like before we broke for our lunch break. When we came back, it sounded more like Friday, and then at the end of the day, we got confirmation that closing arguments are going to start on Friday. Bruce Boilette argued that if he starts his arguments on Thursday afternoon, the NCAA is going to have all night to prepare their closing arguments, and then that's an unfair advantage to the NCAA. So it's an interesting schedule going forward, but we will have closing arguments on Friday. Jury deliberations will start on Monday.
Yeah, that had to be a non-starter. I mean, to have McNair's attorneys have to argue on Thursday and then give the NCAA all night to come back with comebacks for every single thing they said. So, because they had originally said 2.5 hours each back to back.
Yeah.
And, I think Bruce wouldn't have minded doing that on Thursday, but he wasn't going to do his on Thursday and let them do theirs. He said, I wasn't accusing you that you would do that, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah. So what are your expectations for closing arguments? Tomorrow's going to be an early day, so we'll have a short report for that. But what are your expectations for the next 2 days?
Well, I don't know that Bruce has actually dropped the hammer yet, but we've heard a lot of one-way, McNair's a liar, unethical, we gave him a chance, he's just, unrepentant and he just doesn't get it, blah, blah, blah. And as we were just saying, there isn't a lot of conduct by the NCAA that would really fit all of the definitions that they put on Todd. And one wonders if, after maybe not going there, will this be the time when they basically say, we're going there. And we're going to say, if you say, today there was one little bit of that today when they were arguing over. They were doing both the jury instructions and the forms that they have to fill out on the verdicts. And they're really extensive and lots of questions, and every question matters. And if they answer a question one way, then they got to do this and another, and they got to, all of that. And there was one instruction that they were talking about where Todd's attorneys are saying that, if you feel like the other side withheld some things from you, documents or the kind of discovery material that you would have liked to have, like emails, the jury can fine for that, find damages for that. And the NCAA said, well, you didn't tell us you were going to do that. We would have brought an expert, an IT witness, to say what we did, how we produced these documents. And Scott said, well, we weren't going to argue that part of it. What we were going to argue is there are no emails, for example, from Paul D. None, zero. How do you run the committee and not have an email? And I know some of the NCAA people were saying, he's dead. But I think there is a suspicion that there probably ought to be some Paul D. emails, and there aren't. And at that point, I think at first Judge Schaller was a little bit hesitant to put that instruction in because he could say, and they looked at the transcript, and when they talked about it, when the attorneys met before the trial, and he doesn't want any issue that they could appeal and get this whole thing reversed. So at first he said, well, to preserve the record and all that, I'm not sure, we want to have that in there. But then, Scott made the point that, we need to be able to argue that it's a little suspicious that there are no emails from Paul D. And we need to be able to, if the jury decides this, that should be okay. The NCAA wasn't okay. And that's one of those decisions that Judge Schaller said he's going to think about overnight and come back with that decision. That's kind of an important decision, because if you start thinking, man, the NCAA was talking about not doing emails or deleting emails, or Potuto was asked, in the video today, do you know how to double delete? And he said, no, but if you tell me, I'll do it. So she boy, I kill my emails. They're gone. And she was telling other people to do the same thing. So there is a little bit of that kind of a suspicion and a back and forth between them. And we don't know how that's going to play out.
Mm-hmm. As far as the jury goes, how do you think that they're processing this week? I think from lawyers, jury, us, it's a little bit of exhaustion, information overload. How do you think they're processing everything right now?
I think they're just, to some extent, I think they were more enthusiastic note takers early.
Yeah.
And I think they realized, okay, there's a lot of stuff, and we are going to get all of the document, all of the record. We're going to get all the I guess there's almost 1,000 pieces of marked evidence, and they're going to have access to all of those. So you probably have seen more people not really writing a lot of notes anymore. I mean, they've seen enough video depositions. I think it's more just getting a sense of who do you believe and what makes sense, and and there are people who will tell you that's determined fairly early in a trial like this, or determined after they get to see and hear Todd McNair. I could buy that, that was the case, and so I don't know, and I get the sense that the attorneys don't know either. And I know they have a sense of it, but I'm getting the sense that they're just not have a complete fix on this jury.
Yeah, I think we're all wondering at this point, what is the jury thinking? Well, I guess we'll find out relatively soon, but that's going to wrap it up for day 16 of the Todd McNair NCAA trial. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.